Clean my shoes with your tongue." The words cut through the morning noise like a knife. Workers at the entrance of Undertech froze. Even the security at the gate held his breath. Natalia stood tall in her blazer, heels sharp on the pavement, chin lifted like a queen. In front of her, a frail woman in a tattered, dusty gown clutched her stomach. Her hair was messy, as if the night had been long and cold. The woman's voice had been soft a moment earlier. "Please help me. Anything for food. I have not eaten in 2 days." Now she stared at Natalia, eyes wide, as if the ground had moved under her. "Go on," Natalia said, pointing at her clean heels. "If you want to eat today, prove it. Lick them." A breeze swept dust across the compound. Somewhere, a car door slammed. The security man at the gate, broad-shouldered, usually bold, looked down, shame on his face. 2 interns near the flower bed covered their mouths. People had always said Natalia was the brightest software engineer in the company. People had also said she was proud. But this was beyond what anyone expected. The woman's lips trembled. "My name is Margaret," she whispered, steadying herself on the gate rail. "I am hungry. That is all." "Your hunger is your problem," Natalia snapped. "If your father failed you and you chose to be lazy, why should I carry your life on my back? Do it. Then I'll consider helping." Silence pressed on the compound like thick smoke. "Enough." The voice came from behind the crowd, deep, clear, full of power. Engineer Raymond, the operations manager, stepped forward. He wore a simple navy shirt, sleeves rolled, ID card on a lanyard. His eyes were hot with anger. "How dare you, Natalia?" he said. "How dare you speak like this?" Natalia blinked, surprised that he would challenge her in public. "Sir, I see is. Do you know who she is?" Raymond's voice shook the morning. "This woman is our new CEO." Gasps jumped from mouth to mouth. Even the guards looked up sharply. Raymond pointed to the frail woman. "Madam Margaret, the person you just mocked, is the owner of this company. After the death of Chief Obinna, may his soul rest, his will passed Undertech to his goddaughter, Margaret. Today is her first day here. She came in disguise to see hearts, not faces." A bird took off from the company sign, wings flapping hard. Natalia's pride cracked like glass. Color left her cheeks. She looked again at the woman's trembling hands, the tired eyes, the dust on her slippers, signs of a long road walked on purpose. Her throat went dry. I didn't know," she stammered. You thought power is a toy," Raymond said. "You thought hunger makes a person less human. You thought your talent covers your character. It doesn't." He turned to the security team. "Prepare her dismissal letter. I don't care if she is the best engineer in Lagos. We will not keep poison at our gate." The crowd buzzed. Some staff stepped back as if Natalia carried fire. Others pitied her. An intern wiped a tear with the back of her hand. Natalia's body gave way. She dropped to her knees on the rough concrete, not minding the dirt or the eyes watching. She crawled forward and caught the edge of the woman's tattered gown. "I'm sorry," she cried. Please forgive me." Her words spilled fast, broken by breath. "My mother is sick. She has cancer. Every month I send money for drugs. If I lose this job, I lose her. Please, madam. You are a mother. Help me. Don't let my mistake kill her." The frail woman, Madam Margaret, studied Natalia's face. Up close, Natalia no longer looked like a queen. She looked like a daughter who had run out of road. Tears gathered in Margaret's eyes and clung there, heavy and bright. The gate camera's red light blinked. A car engine hummed at the curb. A distant siren wailed and faded. Raymond's voice softened, but only a little. "Madam, say the word. We are ready." Margaret did not speak yet. She looked past Natalia, to the people gathered, the cleaners in blue, the receptionist with her hands pressed together, the young developers behind the glass. She saw fear, she saw anger, she saw hope. She turned back to Natalia. "What is your mother's name?" "Adana," Natalia whispered. "She is all I have." "Stand up," Margaret said gently. Natalia rose on shaky legs, keeping her eyes low. She expected the sky to fall. She expected a security escort to push her out. She expected whispers that would follow her for years. Instead, Margaret reached into the pocket of her worn gown and pulled out a white handkerchief. She handed it to Natalia. "Wipe your face." Natalia took it with both hands and pressed it to her cheeks. The cloth smelled clean, like soap and rain. Margaret faced the crowd. Her voice carried, calm and strong. A company is not only code and contracts, it is character. It is how we treat people when we think no one is watching. Her gaze slid back to Natalia. Today, I saw your worst moment. You saw mine too. You saw me when I looked like no one. Raymond cleared his throat. Madam, with respect, we must protect the company's name. If staff believe cruelty is normal, I know, Margaret said, still looking at Natalia. And cruelty will not be normal here. Natalia squeezed the handkerchief. Her heart was a drum. She could feel everyone waiting for the final word, the sharp cut that would remove her from this place, from the life she built, from the medicine her mother needed. She thought of the nights she coded until sunrise, of praises that made her proud, of the pride that grew teeth and bit strangers. Tears fell again. Please. A black Bentley rolled into the compound, sleek as a panther. 2 SUVs followed. The company logo reflected in their doors as they stopped by the steps. Drivers stepped out. Doors opened with soft clicks. The sight made people murmur. The convoy confirmed what Raymond had said. This beggar held power. Margaret looked at the cars, then at the crowd, then at Natalia. Something warm flickered in her eyes. Memory, maybe. Or pain. She took a long breath. Engineer Raymond, she said. Yes, madam. He straightened. Hold the letter. A ripple of shock moved through the staff. Hold it? Not send it? Margaret wasn't done. Give me a week to think. I will review the camera footage. I will talk to those who know Natalia's work and her heart. This company will stand for excellence, but it will also stand for truth. Raymond hesitated. Understood. Margaret turned to leave, then paused. She faced Natalia one last time. Go inside, wash your hands, and do your work. Let your work speak louder than today's shame. Natalia nodded, crying quietly. Thank you, Ma. Margaret took 2 steps toward the Bentley, then stopped, as if a thought had struck her from deep in the past. Her eyes narrowed, studying Natalia's face, the curve of her brow, the way fear and love battled behind her eyes. The crowd watched, confused. Your mother's name, Margaret said again, slower now. You said, Adana? Yes, Ma, Natalia said, voice barely a breath. Margaret's fingers tightened around the edge of her gown. Something old and sharp crossed her face. Shock, sorrow, recognition, then vanished. She slipped into the back seat of the Bentley. The door closed with a soft thud. Engines growled. The convoy rolled forward, sunlight sliding over the windshields. Natalia stood alone in the middle of the compound, the white handkerchief still warm in her hand, her heart racing. From the front passenger seat, Margaret leaned forward and spoke to her driver. The driver nodded, turned the wheel, and the cars swung toward the gate. Raymond exhaled and faced the staff. Back to work. The Bentley reached the exit line and slowed. For a heartbeat, it did not move. The brake light glowed red like an ember. Then, through the tinted glass, a shadow leaned back, as if making a decision that could change more than one life. The car indicator clicked. Left. Right. Left again. The convoy didn't leave. It turned back into the compound, toward the front steps, and rolled to a stop. The back door opened. Madame Margaret stepped out, eyes fixed on Natalia, voice steady but strange with feeling. Natalia, what is your mother's surname? The compound fell into a strange, heavy silence. Everyone who had been moving toward the building stopped where they were. The black Bentley door remained open, and Madame Margaret stood in the morning light, her eyes locked on Natalia. Your mother's surname? She repeated, her voice lower this time, almost trembling. Natalia swallowed hard. Her lips were dry. Adana Okoye, Ma. The moment the name left her mouth, Margaret's breath caught. Her shoulders stiffened, her fingers tightened on the edge of her gown, and for the first time since she had arrived, disguised as a beggar, her calm broke. Her eyes filled, as if memory had just risen like a ghost she wasn't ready to face. The staff exchanged confused glances. What was going on? Why did their new CEO suddenly look so shaken by the mention of Natalia's mother's name? Natalia, kneeling still with the white handkerchief in her hand, dared to look up. Do you know her? Margaret didn't answer immediately. She turned away from the staring eyes of the crowd and gestured to Raymond. Clear the compound. Now. Raymond blinked. Madam, you heard me, she said, her voice suddenly sharp, commanding. Everyone back inside. Security closed the gates. The staff scattered quickly, whispering, their shoes clicking against the tiled walkway as they hurried into the lobby. The wide company yard that had been buzzing seconds ago went still. Only Natalia, Raymond, and 2 security guards remained near the Bentley. Margaret walked closer to Natalia, each step heavy with something that felt larger than anger or pity. She stopped only a few feet away, her eyes wet, her lips pressed tight. Adana Okoye, she said again, slower, as if tasting the name after years. Tell me, is she your mother? Yes, Ma. Natalia's voice broke, her heart racing at the strange tension. She is my everything. She's sick. And But Margaret wasn't listening anymore. Her face softened with recognition, then cracked with pain. Adana, she whispered, almost to herself. My Adana, my roommate, my sister in those university days. Natalia froze. Her hand clutched the handkerchief tighter. You know my mother? Raymond's brows knitted, stunned by the revelation. Margaret turned her face slightly, her gaze far away, as if she had been pulled back 2 decades. We shared one small hostel room in Nsuka. We ate from the same plate when our money ran out. We swore we would stand by each other no matter what. Then one day, she disappeared from my life. And now, she looked at Natalia again, her tears rolling at last. Now you tell me she is your mother? Natalia's chest tightened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her arrogant act from earlier felt even more bitter. She had insulted the very woman who once called her mother sister. Ma, please, she whispered. If you knew her, please don't let me lose her. Margaret closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, resolve burned behind the tears. She turned to Raymond. Cancel the dismissal letter. She is not to be touched. It soaks too. Raymond's mouth parted in protest, but one look from Margaret shut him down. Yes, madam. Margaret faced Natalia again. Your arrogance nearly destroyed you. But today, God chose to reveal something bigger. You are forgiven. Not because of excuses, but because of the blood that ties me to your mother through years of friendship. Natalia dropped her head, sobbing quietly. Gratitude and shame tangled together. Margaret stepped back and gestured to her convoy. We're done here for today. The cars revved softly. She climbed into the Bentley once more, but this time her expression wasn't simply dignified, it was heavy with determination. Before the door shut, she looked at Natalia again. 1 week, she said firmly. 1 week, Natalia. Expect me. Then the door closed, and the convoy glided out of the compound, leaving dust curling in the air. Natalia walked inside the building with her face lowered, the weight of every eye following her. Inside the open-plan office, whispers rose like waves. Did you hear? She knows her mother. This Natalia, she was finished today, but somehow she's still standing. God saved her. Natalia sat at her desk, her fingers trembling above her keyboard. She tried to focus on her lines of code, but her mind kept replaying Margaret's words. 1 week, expect me. Why would the CEO come looking for her in 1 week? Did she really mean it? Or was it a test to see if she would change? Her chest tightened at the thought of her mother, frail and coughing in their modest bungalow downtown. She pictured her trying to stand, holding her chest, smiling weakly when Natalia brought medicine. What if Margaret truly visited? What if she truly knew her mother? The clock ticked louder than usual. Every keystroke felt like it carried her whole life on it. At lunch, she avoided the cafeteria. She stayed at her desk, nibbling a plain biscuit she found in her drawer. She didn't want stares, didn't want gossip, but even in silence, her colleagues' eyes told her everything they had seen her fall, and they were waiting to see if she could rise. As evening fell and she walked out of the company gates, the security guard at the post cleared his throat. He didn't dare say much, but his words made her stop. Madam Margaret, she is not ordinary, he said quietly. Pray, young woman. This is not the end of your story. It is only the beginning. Natalia nodded, tears burning her eyes. She walked into the Lagos night, the streets noisy, hawkers calling, buses honking. But inside her everything was silent and trembling. Her heart kept asking one question she could not answer. When Madam Margaret comes in, 1 week, what will she find in her house? And just as Natalia turned onto her street, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her chest made her swipe to answer. A calm, older woman's voice spoke on the line. "Is this Natalia?" "Yes," she whispered, unsure. "This is Madame Margaret. Don't be afraid. Tomorrow evening, I want you to take me to see your mother." Natalia froze in the dark street, the phone shaking in her hand. She hadn't expected the week to start tomorrow. Natalia's heart pounded. Tomorrow, her CEO, the woman she insulted, would step into her home and meet her dying mother. The next evening, Lagos skies were painted with streaks of purple and gold as the sun dipped behind the crowded buildings. Natalia stood outside her mother's small bungalow. Her legs trembling, she kept glancing down the road, waiting. Her mother, Adana, lay inside on a thin mattress. The faint sound of her coughs carried through the open window. Natalia had spent the whole day sweeping the house, scrubbing the floor, and even borrowing her neighbor's plastic flowers to make the living room look presentable. Yet still, she feared it wasn't enough. Her phone buzzed. A text. "Outside your gate." Her heart almost stopped. When Natalia stepped out, she saw it. The black Bentley again, polished so much it reflected the streetlight. Behind it, 2 other SUVs idled. Security men in black suits scanned the street, but Madame Margaret herself was already stepping out. She wore a deep green wrapper with golden embroidery, her head tie high and elegant, her eyes sharp yet softened by something personal. Natalia bowed quickly. "Good evening, Ma." "Evening," Margaret said, her eyes already flicking past Natalia toward the bungalow. "Your mother is inside?" "Yes, Ma." They walked in together. Inside the small sitting room, the walls were bare, except for a fading calendar. A faint smell of menthol ointment hung in the air. On the low bed near the window, Adana struggled to sit up, her wrapper loose over her frail shoulders. "Mama, don't move," Natalia whispered, rushing to her side. But Adana's eyes had already fixed on the doorway. The moment she saw Margaret, her lips parted, and the years fell away. "Margaret?" The CEO stopped in her tracks. Her hand trembled as she lowered her head tie slightly, revealing more of her lined but graceful face. "Adana." Her voice cracked. For a moment, time folded. 2 women, once young girls sharing dreams in a university dorm, now stood worlds apart. One a billionaire CEO, the other bound to sickness in a crumbling bungalow. Natalia looked from her mother to Margaret, stunned at the depth of their connection. "My sister," Adana whispered, her voice raspy. I thought life had swallowed you. I prayed to see you again before death." Margaret knelt by the bed, ignoring her expensive wrapper, brushing the dusty floor. She took Adana's thin hands in hers. "No, you will not die. Not like this. Not while I have breath and resources." Tears streamed down Natalia's cheeks. She had never seen her mother smile so widely in months. Margaret turned suddenly to Natalia. "You didn't tell me she was this weak. Why?" Natalia stuttered. "Ma, I was afraid. I thought you would fire me and never look at us again." Margaret's eyes burned, both stern and tender. "Do you think money is all I came here for? Do you think status matters when God puts an old friend in your path again?" She shook her head and looked back at Adana. Adana coughed weakly, but her eyes sparkled. "Margaret, I am not surprised. You always had the heart of a lioness. Even back then, you said you would rise. And you did." Margaret pressed her lips together, fighting emotion. "And I failed you. I should have searched. I should have kept my promise. You are here now," Adana whispered, squeezing her hand. "That is enough." The room fell into a sacred hush. Even the bodyguards waiting at the door lowered their heads as if they had walked into holy ground. Then Margaret rose abruptly. Her eyes hardened with resolve. "Natalia, pack a bag for your mother. Tonight she is not sleeping in this place again. My driver will take her to St. Gregory's private hospital. The best doctors will attend to her." Natalia gasped. "Ma? Really?" "I said tonight," Margaret replied. "And listen to me, girl. Your arrogance yesterday nearly cost you everything. But today, God is rewriting your story through your mother's tears. Don't ever forget that." Natalia nodded quickly, shame and gratitude flooding her chest. "Yes, Ma." Adana tried to protest. "No, Margaret, I don't want to trouble you." "You are not troubling me," Margaret interrupted firmly. "You once shared your food with me when I had none. Let me return a fraction of that kindness." Silence fell again, thick with emotion. Natalia hurried to the corner to pack her mother's things, just a small bag with wrappers and a Bible. Soon, two men gently lifted Adana onto a stretcher. As they carried her out, neighbors gathered at the gate, their mouths open. They watched in disbelief as the convoy of cars carried the frail widow away under the protection of armed guards and tinted glass. Natalia stood outside, tears rolling, until Margaret touched her shoulder. "Come with us," she said simply. Natalia nodded, climbing into the car beside her mother. As the convoy moved into the night, Margaret looked out the window, her expression unreadable. But Natalia could see her jaw tighten as if a storm brewed inside her. At last, Margaret spoke softly but firmly, almost to herself. "If the board must know, they will know. If the staff must learn, they will learn. But one thing is certain, this family will not be abandoned again." Natalia shivered at her words. Something told her the visit tonight was only the beginning of a greater story. And as the convoy sped toward the hospital lights glowing in the distance, Natalia's heart beat faster. Because she knew whatever tomorrow brought, her life would never be the same again. As the convoy reached the hospital gates, Margaret received a phone call. She listened, her face changing from calm to thunder. Hanging up, she whispered words that sent chills through Natalia. "They have betrayed me inside the company." The hospital lobby gleamed with white tiles and bright lights, smelling of antiseptic. Nurses in neat uniforms hurried past, while the security detail opened a path for Madame Margaret and her party. Natalia clutched her mother's hand as Adana was wheeled toward the private ward. Relief washed over her, yet the words Margaret had spoken in the car still echoed. "They have betrayed me inside the company." What did she mean? Margaret's face was stone. She walked beside the stretcher, her mind elsewhere, her jaw tight. When Adana was finally settled in a large private room with oxygen and soft pillows, Margaret ordered, "2 nurses here at all times. I want daily reports sent directly to me." The staff bowed quickly. Nobody dared argue with the billionaire CEO. Only when the room quieted did Natalia gather courage to ask, "Ma, what betrayal? What happened?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. She hesitated, then motioned Natalia to step outside. In the corridor, her voice was low but firm. "A board member just informed me. Some of my top employees are plotting to sell confidential projects to a foreign competitor. They used my disguise yesterday as an excuse, claiming I have become too sentimental to lead." Natalia's heart thudded. "But Ma, that's treason against the company." "Yes," Margaret said, her voice like iron. "And it is happening inside my own walls. I trusted them. Now they want me out." Natalia trembled. Only yesterday, she was the one on the edge of being thrown out. Now, she was standing in the shadows of something much bigger than herself. Margaret turned sharply, her eyes boring into hers. "Listen to me. What you did yesterday showed me your weakness, but tonight, I see a different fire in you, the fire your mother carried when we were young. If you want to redeem yourself, this is your chance." "Chance?" Natalia asked, confused. "Yes. I need someone the board underestimates, someone they will not suspect. You, Natalia, will become my eyes and ears inside the office. You will report everything you see and hear. If you succeed, you won't just keep your job, you will rise." Natalia froze, torn between fear and excitement. "Me? But Ma, they already dislike me. If they find out—" "They won't," Margaret interrupted, "because you will learn to be wise. This is no longer about pride. This is survival for you, your mother, and this company." Natalia lowered her eyes. Her chest burned with a strange mix of shame, fear, and determination. "Yes, Ma. I will do it." Margaret studied her closely, then nodded. "Good. Tomorrow, you will return to work as if nothing happened. You will act humble, listen carefully, and feed me the truth. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ma." The next morning, Natalia dressed in her plainest shirt and skirt. No makeup, no flashy heels, just a simple, respectful look. When she arrived at the company, the whispers began again. "She survived? After insulting Madam, she should have been gone." But Natalia ignored them. She kept her head down, just as Margaret had advised. She typed quietly, coded without complaints, and smiled politely at anyone who sneered. Inside, her heart raced, waiting for her chance to observe. It didn't take long. At lunch, she noticed 3 senior staff members whispering in the corner of the cafeteria. Andrew, the branch manager, Mrs. Catherine, head of operations, and a young man named Felix from finance. They spoke in low tones, but Natalia caught fragments. Foreign investor ready. If Madam doesn't step aside, board will vote next week. Her spoon trembled in her hand. Could this be the betrayal Margaret spoke of? When they left, Natalia hurried to the restroom, pulled out her phone, and typed a quick message to Margaret. Andrew, Catherine, and Felix plotting. They mentioned board vote next week. Possible deal with foreign investor. She hit send, her pulse racing. Minutes later, her phone vibrated with a reply. Good, watch them closely. But don't act. I will handle the board myself. Natalia exhaled in relief, but deep inside, she knew she had just stepped into a dangerous game. That evening, she rushed to the hospital. Adana looked stronger already, smiling faintly as she sipped tea. Nay, you look calmer today, she said. Natalia forced a smile. I'm trying, Mama. Things at work are different now. Adana touched her hand. Remember, arrogance breaks a person, but humility opens doors. Whatever you do it with wisdom. Natalia nodded, though she dared not reveal the truth of her secret mission. She didn't want to worry her mother. Minutes later, Margaret entered the room, her presence filling it. She smiled briefly at Adana, then turned to Natalia. Walk with me. They stepped into the hospital garden. Margaret's phone was in her hand, her tone urgent. Your report was accurate. I have confirmed it. Andrew and the others are indeed pushing for a board vote to replace me with a puppet CEO. They have already met the foreign investor twice. If they succeed, thousands of jobs will be lost, including yours. Natalia shivered. What can we do? Margaret's eyes gleamed with determination. Expose them. But not yet. First, we must gather undeniable proof. She looked straight at Natalia, her voice sharp. Tomorrow, you must find out where their next secret meeting will be. That information will decide the fate of this company. Natalia's heart skipped. Could she really do this? She was only a junior software engineer, yet suddenly she was being trusted with something that could topple giants. I will try, Ma, she whispered. No, Margaret corrected firmly. You will not try. You will succeed. The weight of the words sank into Natalia's bones. That night, back home, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The fan spun slowly, the shadows shifting. She thought of her mother resting peacefully in the hospital bed, cared for like never before. She thought of Margaret, fierce and unbending, trusting her. And she thought of the conspirators, powerful and dangerous, plotting in the shadows. One mistake could destroy her, but one victory could redeem her name forever. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer she hadn't prayed in years. God, please, give me wisdom. The next morning at work, as Natalia quietly coded at her desk, an envelope slipped onto her table. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a note with bold, handwritten words. We know what you are doing. Stop spying, or else. Natalia's hands shook as she held the note. Her eyes darted around the office, but everyone looked busy, typing, talking, pretending not to notice her. Who had slipped it onto her desk? How much did they know? Her throat went dry. She quickly folded the paper and shoved it into her drawer, trying to look calm. But inside, her heart was racing. That evening, when she met Madame Margaret in the hospital garden, she couldn't hold back. She pulled out the crumpled note. Ma, they know. Someone is watching me. Margaret's eyes darkened as she read the words. So, they are already suspicious. She tore the note in two and let the pieces fall. Good. That means we are close to the truth. But Ma, what if they... Listen to me. Margaret cut in sharply. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. If you run now, they win. If you stay, you prove yourself worthy of more than coding lines. You prove yourself as a leader. Natalia swallowed hard. What do you want me to do? Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. Tomorrow night, Andrew and the others are meeting at Grandview Hotel, room 402. I need you to go there before them. Place this recorder in the room. She slipped a small black device into Natalia's hand. It will capture everything. Natalia's stomach twisted. Ma, if they catch me, they won't, Margaret said firmly. I have people watching from outside, but only you can enter, without suspicion. Natalia stared at the recorder, her palms sweating. Yesterday, she was almost dismissed for arrogance. Now, she was being asked to walk straight into danger. But when she thought of her mother sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, she tightened her grip on the device. "I will do it," she whispered. The following night, Lagos buzzed with neon lights and restless traffic. Natalia arrived at Grandview Hotel, dressed plainly, carrying a small bag. She walked into the lobby, her heart pounding. The receptionist barely looked at her, another young woman among many. She slipped into the elevator, pressing the button for the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in red. Room 402 stood at the end, its brass numbers glinting. Natalia's hands trembled as she fumbled with the universal keycard Margaret had arranged through a discreet ally. The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside, the room smelled of fresh polish and cologne. A round table sat in the center, with bottled water and glasses neatly arranged. Natalia quickly placed the recorder beneath the table, taping it to the underside. She checked the light. It blinked red. Recording. Her chest thudded. She turned to leave, but just then, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Voices. Panic seized her. She darted into the bathroom, closing the door softly. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she pressed her ear to the wood. The door opened. Laughter spilled in. Andrew's voice boomed. "Ah, tonight we settle it. By next week, Madame Margaret will be history." Catherine's sharper tone followed. "Yes, the investor has agreed to double the offer. Once we present the board with figures, they'll turn against her." Felix chuckled. "Let her keep her hospital visits. While she plays mother to that foolish girl, we will take the company." Natalia's fists clenched. That foolish girl. They were talking about her. Her face burned with humiliation, but also with fire. For nearly an hour, she listened to their voices rise and fall. Plans, figures, dates. Every word sank into the recorder. At last, their laughter grew faint as they left the room. Natalia crept out, her legs weak. She grabbed the recorder and slipped it into her bag. Then she hurried down the hall, through the lobby, and out into the buzzing Lagos night. Her phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. "Did you get it?" Natalia typed back. "Yes." The next morning the boardroom was packed. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier. Every executive sat stiffly in their seats, eyes sharp with suspicion. At the head of the table, Madame Margaret entered, regal in a white lace wrapper. Beside her, unexpectedly, stood Natalia. Murmurs rippled through the room. Andrew smirked. "Madam, I hope you called this meeting for something serious. Some of us have important." "Silence," Margaret said, her voice cutting like a blade. She placed the recorder on the table and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of Andrew's voice. "By next week, Madame Margaret will be history." Gasps erupted. Catherine's laughter followed. "The investor has agreed to double the offer. Once we present the board with figures, they'll turn against her." Then Felix's mocking tone. "Let her keep her hospital visits. While she plays mother to that foolish girl, we will take the company." The executives froze. Andrew's face drained of color. Catherine's hands trembled. Felix stammered. Margaret's gaze swept the room like fire. "These are the people you trusted. This is what they planned behind your backs." The board members looked at one another, shame and fury flashing in their eyes. One stood up. "Madam, forgive us. We had no idea." Margaret pointed at the conspirators. "Security, remove them. They are finished." Guards stepped in. Andrew, Catherine, and Felix protested, but their voices drowned in the shock of the board. They were dragged out, their downfall complete. The room fell silent. Margaret placed a hand on Natalia's shoulder. This young woman, whom some of you mocked as arrogant and weak, risked her life to expose this betrayal. From today, she is no longer just an employee. She is my special assistant. Whispers rose, but no one argued. Natalia's face flushed, tears blurring her eyes. Her life had changed in 1 week, from shame and near dismissal to honor and trust. Margaret smiled faintly, her voice firm. "Let this be a lesson. Pride may blind you, but humility and courage will lift you higher than you ever dreamed." Natalia bowed her head, whispering, "Thank you, Ma." But inside, her heart shouted louder than words. "Mama, we made it." The months that followed were like a sunrise after a long night of storms. For 3 months, Adana stayed in the private hospital under Madame Margaret's care. Doctors worked tirelessly. Chemotherapy, medications, constant monitoring, everything was provided at no cost. Each time Natalia visited, she found her mother looking a little stronger, a little brighter, her once frail voice gaining life again. It wasn't an easy journey. There were nights Natalia cried herself to sleep, fearing she would lose her mother. But Margaret never wavered. She visited often, sometimes quietly holding Adana's hand, sometimes reminiscing about the youthful days when they were roommates at university. The bond between the two women grew deeper as the cancer receded. Finally, one cool morning in Lagos, the doctors declared Adana healed. The discharge day was a flood of emotions. Adana wept uncontrollably, hugging Margaret as if she were a long-lost sister returned from exile. "You didn't just save my life. Margaret, you gave me back my daughter's future," she sobbed. Natalia stood at the side, tears rolling down her cheeks. She could not find words, her heart was too full. It was in this tender moment that a tall young man walked into the ward. His steps were firm but respectful, his smile warm. He walked directly to Natalia, placed his hand gently on her shoulder, and said, "Mommy has always been like this. Just continue to be good, and you'll enjoy working for her company." Natalia blinked, startled. "And you are?" Margaret turned, her face lighting up in pride. "My son, Jerry. My only child." Jerry had just returned from abroad. Sponsored by the late Chief Obinna, Margaret's father's closest friend, who treated him like a grandson. Jerry had achieved a double degree in software engineering and cybersecurity. Though born into wealth, he carried himself with humility, speaking politely and listening with care. Adana smiled at him, remembering how she used to tease Margaret in university. "One day, you'll have a son who carries both your stubbornness and your brilliance." Now, here he was, a living reflection of his mother. A week later, Jerry officially joined the company. He was placed in the IT department, where his skills naturally brought him close to Natalia. At first, they kept things professional, discussing projects, debugging codes late into the evening, planning system security improvements. But soon, the lines blurred. They began to share meals together after work. Jerry noticed Natalia's quiet strength, her transformation from arrogance into humility. Natalia saw in Jerry not only intelligence but kindness, a rare kind of man who listened without judgment. One night, after a long coding session, Jerry suggested they grab dinner at a small garden restaurant in Lagos. The place was simple but elegant, with twinkling lights hanging from trees and the soft strumming of a guitar in the background. As they ate, Jerry leaned closer. "You know, Natalia, I used to hear stories of how arrogant you were at the office." Natalia lowered her eyes in shame. "It's true, I was blinded by my talent. But your mother taught me a lesson I'll never forget." Jerry smiled softly. "That's the thing, sometimes God allows us to stumble so we can rise stronger." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them. After that evening, they grew closer, from dinners to late-night discussions about life, to shared dreams of building software that could protect African companies from cyber attacks. Their bond deepened into love. 3 months later, Jerry invited Natalia back to the same garden restaurant. This time, the setting was magical roses arranged on the tables, fairy lights glowing, and soft music playing in the background. As Natalia admired the beauty around her, Jerry suddenly went down on one knee. "Natalia," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "The first time I saw you, I knew there was something special about you. You have fought, you have changed, and you have inspired me more than you realize. Will you make me the happiest man alive and be my wife?" Tears streamed down Natalia's face. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." The restaurant erupted in cheers as Jerry slipped a ring onto her finger. Natalia covered her face, overwhelmed, as Jerry rose and pulled her into his arms. 3 months later, Lagos witnessed one of the most extravagant weddings of the year. Sponsored fully by Madame Margaret, it was a celebration of not just two people, but of redemption, forgiveness, and family. The ceremony took place in a grand cathedral with high arched ceilings and colorful stained glass windows. Hundreds of guests filled the pews, business leaders, family friends, employees, and even community members who had once whispered about Natalia's fall from grace. When the music began, the doors opened. Natalia, radiant in a white lace gown, walked down the aisle. But she was not alone. On her right, Madame Margaret held her arm, tears glistening in her eyes. On her left, Adana, strong and healthy once more, walked proudly. Together, the two women guided Natalia toward her future. The crowd gasped, many wiping tears. The image was powerful. Two women once separated by years of silence, now united, giving away the young woman whose life tied their destinies together. At the altar, Jerry waited in a white suit, his smile wide and unshakable. As the pastor asked who gave the bride away, both Margaret and Adana raised their hands together, their voices blending. "We do." After the vows were exchanged and rings placed on fingers, the pastor invited Natalia to speak. She held the microphone, her voice breaking with tears. "At a point in my life, I was arrogant, childish, and uncultured because I was one of the best software engineers in my company at a young age. Then, one day, I saw a beggar at the gate. I didn't know it was my billionaire CEO, Madam Margaret, in disguise. I disrespected her. She was supposed to sack me. But after hearing about my sick mother, she gave me a second chance. The hall was silent, every eye on her. She visited my mother, discovered they were old friends, and sponsored her treatment. My mother was healed of cancer. At the hospital, I met Jerry, her son. After working together, we became lovers. And today, I am getting married to the son of the woman who gave me and my mother a second chance. She made me a better person. She gave my mother a new life. And she gave me love." Tears streamed down her face as applause thundered through the hall. Some guests openly wept. The marriage began with laughter, hope, and dreams. But as years passed, Natalia and Jerry faced challenges of their own. They longed for children, yet months turned into years with no pregnancy. Whispered comments from relatives and friends stung, but the couple held on to each other with faith. 3 years later, their prayers were answered. Natalia gave birth to twin girls, tiny, beautiful, perfect. They named them Margaret and Adana, honoring the two women who had carried them through storms. On the day of the naming ceremony, Madam Margaret and Adana each held one of the babies in their arms. Tears streamed down their faces as they looked at one another. Two women, once separated, now bound forever, not just by friendship, but by family, by bloodlines joined through love, Margaret whispered. "We lost time, but God gave us back more than we imagined." Adana nodded, kissing her granddaughter's forehead. "Yes, this was all possible because you chose kindness when you could have chosen anger." The crowd applauded, clapping joyfully as the grandmothers lifted the twins high. Natalia and Jerry stood together, their hands clasped tightly. Natalia's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude. She thought of where she had started, arrogant, reckless, nearly destroyed, and where she was now, a wife, a mother, a daughter, and part of something greater than herself. All of it, she knew, was because one woman had chosen to give her a second chance. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky orange and gold, the family gathered in the garden. The twins cooed in their grandmother's arms, while Jerry and Natalia stood close, watching with joy. Natalia whispered to Jerry, "Do you realize everything changed because of one day? Because of one test?" Jerry smiled, slipping his arm around her. "That's how destiny works. One moment, one decision, can change generations." Margaret looked at Adana, her eyes misty. "We are not just friends anymore. We are in-laws. We are mothers. We are grandmothers. And we are proof that kindness is stronger than pride." Adana squeezed her hand. "Yes, and now our story continues in them." Together, they laughed through their tears, holding on to the gift life had returned to them. And so, from arrogance came humility, from sickness came healing, and from second chances came love that would echo for generations. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.